Antarctica does not forgive. Under winds reaching 100 to 80 miles per hour and temperatures plummeting to minus 128 degrees Fahrenheit, the most inhospitable continent on Earth guards secrets preserved for millions of years. In December 2019, a team of Norwegian glaciologists arrived at the Troll Research Station, located in Queen Maud Land, with a singular mission: to map subglacial lakes using ground-penetrating radar technology. Dr. Henrik Johansson led the expedition. A veteran of polar research with 15 years of experience in extreme environments, he had participated in dozens of drilling operations across the Antarctic ice sheet. But nothing in his career had prepared him for what the equipment would reveal 2,400 meters beneath the surface. The first anomaly appeared on the third day of scanning. The radar showed a massive cavity, roughly the size of Manhattan, hidden under layers of ice that had remained untouched for an estimated 15 million years. The lake itself wasn't unusual. Scientists had already catalogued over 400 subglacial lakes across Antarctica. What caught their attention was something else entirely. The radar readings displayed a geometric pattern at the bottom of the lake. Not random, not natural, perfectly symmetrical. "We ran the diagnostics 4 times, Johansson would later report to the Norwegian Polar Institute. Equipment malfunction was the logical conclusion, but every scan showed the same thing: a structure, angular, deliberate. The temperature inside the research station hovered around 68 degrees Fahrenheit, but the room fell silent with a different kind of cold. The team exchanged glances, each scientist understanding the implications without speaking them aloud. Natural geological formations don't create right angles, ice doesn't organize itself into patterns, and nothing human-made should exist beneath ice that old. Within 24 hours, satellite imagery was redirected to the coordinates. High-resolution thermal scans were deployed. The Norwegian government quietly contacted scientific institutions in the United States, Russia, and the United Kingdom. By the end of the week, what began as a routine glaciology mission had transformed into something far more complex. The decision was made to drill. Not immediately. The logistics of accessing a lake nearly 2 miles beneath the ice required months of preparation, specialized equipment, and international cooperation. But the green light was given. Protocols were established. Teams were assembled. On March 12, 2020, just as the drilling operation was about to commence, something changed. The structure began emitting a signal. It wasn't sound, not in the conventional sense. The monitoring equipment picked up low-frequency pulses, rhythmic and consistent, emanating from the object beneath the ice. The frequency measured 28 Hz, below the range of human hearing, but detectable by sensitive instruments. It felt like a heartbeat, one technician noted in his personal log. Slow, steady, as if something down there had woken up. The global pandemic forced the temporary evacuation of the station. Research teams were recalled. Borders closed. The Antarctic summer season ended, and the continent plunged into 6 months of darkness and isolation. Only a skeleton crew of 3 remained at Troll Station, maintaining essential systems and monitoring equipment. The signal continued, through April, through May, through the endless polar night. Then, on August 4th, 2020, it stopped. Not gradually, not with any decrease in intensity. One moment the pulses were there, as consistent as they had been for nearly 5 months. The next moment, silence. Complete. Absolute. When researchers returned in November 2020, they found the monitoring equipment fully functional. The data logs were intact, showing the exact second the signal ceased, 03:14:07 UTC. But the structure itself had changed. The geometric patterns were still visible on radar. The cavity remained. The subglacial lake showed no signs of movement or disturbance. But something fundamental had shifted. The thermal signature was different, cooler by exactly 3.7 degrees Celsius across the entire structure. It was as if whatever had been active beneath the ice had simply turned off. No drilling operation has yet reached the structure. International disagreements over jurisdiction, environmental concerns about contaminating a pristine ecosystem, and the sheer technical challenge of accessing something so deep have created delays that stretch into years. The site remains under continuous monitoring, but no physical contact has been made. Scientists propose theories: ancient volcanic activity, unusual mineral deposits, acoustic phenomena created by ice movement. Each explanation attempts to rationalize what the data shows, but none fully account for the geometric precision, the signal's sudden appearance, or its equally sudden cessation. Meanwhile, the ice above continues its slow eternal movement, keeping its secret buried in darkness and cold, exactly as it has for millions of years. The second expedition arrived in November 2021, nearly 2 years after the initial discovery. This time, the team consisted of specialists from 7 different nations: geophysicists, microbiologists, engineers, and military advisors, whose presence was never officially acknowledged in any public record. The operation was designated Project Cascade, though the name appeared in no database accessible to civilian oversight. Funding came through channels that bypassed traditional scientific grants, routed through defense departments and private contractors whose names were redacted from every document. The drilling platform itself was a marvel of engineering, capable of melting through ice at a rate of 12 meters per hour, while maintaining a sterile corridor to prevent contamination of the subglacial environment. Its construction had taken 18 months and cost an estimated $470 million, though official budgets listed the figure as a fraction of that amount. Dr. Sarah Chen, a geophysicist from the University of Cambridge, supervised the drilling operations. She had spent 3 decades studying subglacial environments, her work contributing to the discovery of Lake Vostok and the development of clean drilling techniques that revolutionized polar research. When colleagues asked her privately what she expected to find beneath the ice, her answer was always the same: "We'll know when we get there." The drilling began on November 18, 2021, at 06 mile local time, under skies so clear that researchers could see stars even in the permanent daylight of Antarctic summer. The rig's thermal drill bit, heated to 90 degrees Celsius, began its slow descent through ice that had been compressed over millennia into a substance harder than concrete. Progress was monitored in real time by sensors embedded in the drill shaft, transmitting data on temperature, pressure, density, and chemical composition of the ice at every meter of depth. The first 800 meters proceeded exactly as predicted. Ice core samples showed the expected layers of compressed snow, each stratum representing a different era of Earth's climate history. At 950 meters, the drill encountered a layer of volcanic ash, likely deposited during an eruption that occurred roughly 17,000 years ago. The ash was analyzed, catalogued, and stored for later study. By the 6th day of drilling, they had reached 1,600 meters. The ice at this depth was under such immense pressure that it existed in a crystalline structure found nowhere else on Earth's surface. At 2,100 meters, something changed. The drill's temperature sensors detected a shift in the ice's thermal conductivity. It was subtle, a variation of less than half a degree, but in an environment where temperature gradients were predictable and consistent, any deviation warranted attention. Chen ordered the drilling paused. Additional sensors were lowered alongside the drill shaft, measuring electromagnetic fields, radiation levels, and seismic activity. The readings showed nothing alarming, but the thermal anomaly persisted. The ice at this depth was warmer than it should be, by exactly 0.4 degrees Celsius, across a vertical distance of approximately 60 meters. At 2,287 meters, the drill broke through into open water. The subglacial lake had been reached. Cameras mounted on the drill assembly transmitted the first images from an environment that had been sealed off from the surface world for millions of years. The water was clear, far clearer than anyone had anticipated, with visibility extending nearly 40 meters in the beam of high-powered lights. When water samples were analyzed, they revealed the presence of microbial life, bacteria and archaea that had evolved in complete isolation, adapted to survive in conditions of perpetual darkness, extreme pressure, and near-freezing temperatures. But the microbes were not why the expedition had come. The structure lay 340 meters below the ice-water interface, resting on the lakebed in 2,627 meters of total depth from the surface. Sonar mapping had provided rough dimensions before the drilling began, but now, with direct access to the lake, submersible drones could be deployed for visual confirmation. The first drone descended on November 29th, its lights cutting through water that had never before been touched by illumination of any kind. What the cameras revealed in those first moments of visual contact would be classified, analyzed, debated, and ultimately shared with only a select group of individuals whose security clearances exceeded top secret. The footage has never been publicly released, but those who saw it reported the same details, with a consistency that suggested either absolute accuracy or carefully coordinated rehearsal. The object was approximately 180 meters in length, roughly cylindrical, with a surface that appeared metallic, though spectroscopic analysis indicated a composition unlike any known alloy. Its surface was smooth, almost mirror-like, showing no signs of corrosion despite being submerged for what ice core dating suggested was at least 15 million years. Along its length, geometric patterns were etched or embedded into the material, forming shapes that repeated at regular intervals. Hexagons, triangles, and symbols that resembled no known language or mathematical notation. The object showed no signs of biological growth, no accumulation of sediment, nothing to indicate it had been resting on the lakebed for geological timescales. It looked, in every observable way, as if it had been placed there recently, though every piece of evidence confirmed that was impossible. The drone circled the structure 3 times, cameras recording from every angle, sensors measuring magnetic fields, radiation, and acoustic properties. The magnetic readings were unusual. The structure generated its own field, weak but measurable, with a polarity that shifted in patterns no natural geological formation could produce. Radiation levels were elevated, though still within safe parameters, emitting primarily in the infrared spectrum with occasional bursts of ultraviolet that lasted microseconds. The acoustic sensors detected vibrations at frequencies both above and below human hearing range, creating harmonics that some technicians later described as almost musical, though no melody or pattern could be definitively identified. Then, as the drone completed its 3rd pass and began to ascend toward the surface, something happened that no one had anticipated. The structure's surface changed. Not dramatically, not with any visible movement or mechanical action, but the geometric patterns began to emit light, faint at first, barely distinguishable from the drone's own illumination, then brighter, pulsing in the same 28 Hz rhythm that had been detected a year earlier, before the signal had mysteriously ceased. The light was blue-white, cold and steady, spreading across the structure's surface like circuitry activating after a long dormancy. The patterns seemed to respond to the drone's proximity, brightening as the submersible drew closer, dimming slightly when it retreated. Dr. Chen watched the live feed from the control room, her expression unreadable, her hand hovering over the emergency recall button, but never pressing it. The drone's instruments registered a massive surge in electromagnetic activity, so intense that several sensors temporarily overloaded and required automatic recalibration. Then, for exactly 7 seconds, every piece of electronic equipment at the drilling site went dark. Computers shut down mid-process, their screens flickering to black without warning or error messages. Lights failed throughout the facility, plunging workspaces into the strange twilight of Antarctic summer, filtered through reinforced windows. Communication systems went silent, satellite uplinks severed, radio frequencies filled with static that one operator would later describe as sounding like whispers in an unknown language, though official reports attributed this to electromagnetic interference. Backup generators should have engaged automatically within 2 seconds, but they too remained offline, as if something had reached into every system simultaneously and simply switched everything off. In those 7 seconds, the temperature inside the control room dropped by 4 degrees Celsius, a change so rapid that several researchers noticed their breath misting in the air. When systems rebooted, exactly 7 seconds after the blackout began, the data logs showed a gap, a perfect synchronized interruption across every device, as if time itself had paused and then resumed without acknowledgement of the discontinuity. The drone's cameras had continued recording throughout the blackout, their mechanical systems unaffected by whatever had disrupted the electronic infrastructure above. The footage from those 7 seconds showed the structure blazing with light, its geometric patterns forming sequences that changed too rapidly for human perception to follow. Frame-by-frame analysis would later reveal that the patterns never repeated, each configuration appearing once and only once across the 7-second interval, creating a total of 196 unique geometric arrangements. Mathematicians brought in to analyze the sequences found correlations with prime numbers, Fibonacci progressions, and spatial relationships that appeared intentional but whose purpose remained opaque. One researcher suggested the patterns might represent a form of communication, though directed at what or whom remained unanswered. Another proposed they were simply the visible manifestation of the structure's internal processes, whatever those might be, operating according to principles that human science had yet to discover. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the light faded. The patterns went dark. The structure returned to its inert, mirror-smooth state, giving no indication that anything had occurred. The electromagnetic surge dissipated. Temperature readings normalized. The water around the structure, which thermal cameras had shown warming by nearly half a degree during the activation, cooled back to its ambient 2.3 degrees Celsius. The drone remained functional, all its systems operational, and began its ascent as programmed. But when it surfaced and was recovered, technicians discovered something that would prompt 3 separate investigations. The drone's outer casing, constructed from titanium alloy designed to withstand pressures far exceeding what it had experienced, showed microscopic etchings across its entire surface. The marks were identical to the geometric patterns observed on the structure below, replicated with such precision that they could only be detected under electron microscopy. No tool or process known to current technology could have created such marks on titanium, certainly not in the 7 seconds when the structure had been active. The drone was immediately quarantined. All submersible operations were suspended pending analysis of what had happened. Dr. Chen compiled a report that was transmitted via encrypted satellite link to oversight committees in 7 countries. The report included full documentation of the blackout, the geometric sequences, the thermal anomalies, and the inexplicable markings on the drone. She made no speculations, offered no theories, simply presented the data and requested guidance on how to proceed. 48 hours later, orders came down from levels of authority that superseded scientific curiosity, from offices whose existence was not publicly acknowledged, and officials whose names appeared on no organizational charts. No further drones were to be sent down. No physical contact with the structure was to be attempted. The drilling operation was to be concluded, the access hole sealed with a concrete plug, and the site marked for long-term monitoring only. Project Cascade was officially terminated on December 4, 2021. The research teams were evacuated by December 10th. By December 15th, the drilling platform had been disassembled and removed, leaving only a small monitoring station with automated sensors and a single rotating crew of 2 technicians whose job was to watch instruments and report any changes. The official explanation cited environmental concerns about contaminating a pristine ecosystem and the prohibitive costs of continued operations in such an extreme environment. Scientific journals published brief mentions of a subglacial lake exploration that had yielded interesting microbial samples, but nothing more. The structure beneath the ice was never mentioned in any public documentation, but the monitoring continued. Seismic sensors tracked every vibration. Electromagnetic detectors measured field fluctuations. Thermal cameras watched for temperature variations. Hydrophones listened to the lake's acoustic signature. The data flowed continuously via satellite to facilities in Norway, the United States, Russia, and 3 other nations whose involvement remained classified. For 18 months, nothing changed. The structure remained inert, its geometric patterns dark, its surface reflecting nothing but the absolute darkness of the subglacial environment. The 28 Hz signal did not return. No electromagnetic surges were detected. The lake remained as it had been for millions of years, cold, dark, and silent. Then, in June 2023, the seismic sensors registered movement. Not violent, not sudden, but unmistakable. The structure had shifted position by approximately 40 centimeters over a period of 3 hours. There was no seismic activity in the region that could account for the movement. No changes in water pressure or temperature. The structure had simply moved, as if under its own power, and then stopped. Analysis of the seismic data revealed something even more puzzling. The movement had been perfectly smooth, with none of the vibrations or friction signatures that would accompany an object of that mass sliding across a lake bed. It was as if the structure had floated, repositioned itself with precision, and settled back down without disturbing the sediment around it. An emergency consultation was convened among the oversight committees. The debate lasted 11 hours. Some argued for a return expedition, for deploying more sophisticated equipment to understand what was happening beneath the ice. Others insisted that the structure had demonstrated capabilities beyond current understanding, and that any further interaction carried unacceptable risks. The final decision was to maintain monitoring only, but to increase sensor coverage and establish protocols for rapid response should additional changes occur. 3 weeks later, the structure moved again. This time 80 centimeters, in a direction that placed it closer to the access hole that had been sealed months earlier. Then it stopped and waited. Over the following year, the pattern repeated. Every 3 to 4 weeks, the structure would shift position, always moving in small increments, always toward the sealed drilling site, always with the same impossible smoothness. By September 2024, it had traveled a total distance of 14 meters from its original position. Projections suggested that at its current rate, it would reach the location directly beneath the sealed access hole in approximately 8 months. What would happen then remained a question no one could answer with anything resembling confidence. The technicians stationed at the monitoring facility reported other changes. Equipment malfunctions became more frequent, always minor, always inexplicable. Compasses began showing variations of several degrees from true magnetic north. Electronic devices would occasionally reset themselves without user input. One technician documented experiencing vivid dreams of geometric patterns that matched those observed on the structure, though she had never been shown the classified footage. When questioned, she described the patterns in perfect detail, drawing them from memory with an accuracy that 3 separate analysts confirmed as exact. She was rotated out of the facility and has not returned. As of January 2025, the structure continues its slow migration across the lakebed. The monitoring station remains operational, its sensors tracking every movement, every fluctuation, every anomaly. International agreements keep the site restricted, with a no-fly zone extending 200 kilometers in all directions, and satellite surveillance ensuring no unauthorized approaches. The existence of the structure remains one of the most closely guarded secrets in modern history, known only to a few hundred individuals across multiple governments and scientific institutions. Scientists continue to analyze the data, searching for patterns, for explanations, for any framework that might make sense of what was found beneath the ice. Theories range from ancient terrestrial civilizations to extraterrestrial artifacts, from natural phenomena not yet understood to technological remnants of a future that somehow reached backward through time. None of the theories can account for all the observed evidence. None can explain why the structure activated when approached, why it marked the drone with its own patterns, or why it now moves with apparent purpose toward the surface. The ice above remains unchanged, 2,627 meters of frozen water compressed over millions of years, keeping whatever lies below separated from the world above. For now, the barrier holds. The structure continues its patient journey upward, moving inches at a time, waiting in the darkness. And somewhere in offices far from the Antarctic cold, people watch monitors and wait for the moment when the distance closes to zero, wondering what will happen when something that has been buried for 15 million years finally reaches the place where light once penetrated the ice. The only certainty is that no one knows the answer, and perhaps some quietly suggest that ignorance is the only thing keeping the world as we know it intact.